under arrest.
It was the longest shootout in American law enforcement history.
This standoff is over.
The 1993 Waco event remains one of the most important and devastating in American history. During the 7-week siege, 21 children and 14 adults came out of Mount Carmel. But their so-called messiah, David Koresh, and his hardcore followers preferred to risk bloodshed than surrender. However, there are still persistent, unanswered questions from the unfortunate 1993 events. Why didn't the FBI wait out Koresh and his followers? Who started the horrible fire? What caused the siege in the first place? The FBI assault on Mount Carmel led to the deaths of 73 people, including 23 children, and the aftermaths are still felt today. So, it's no surprise that we're taking another look at what happened at Waco. Welcome back to Crime Mystic, where we cover solved, unsolved, and mysterious cases from across the globe. Today, we're taking a closer look at the Waco events of 1993, which took the lives of many and placed the FBI under scrutiny. Before we go on, hit the subscribe button and never miss our videos on interesting cases. And like this video. Now, join us as we place the Waco events under an investigative lens. Who was David Koresh and the Davidians? David Koresh, born Vernon Wayne Howell, was a charismatic religious leader and an evil cult leader, held responsible for the deaths of 76 men, women, and children. He charmed families worldwide with his biblical teachings, luring them into his Waco compound. His cult, called the Branch Davidians, crossed the fine line between divinity and death, often referred to as a madman. He claimed to be the Messiah and the Son of God. The Branch Davidians spread their tentacles across the ocean and had men, women, and children from Australia moving in. Koresh demolished all the cottages in the compound, and as this happened, he built his fortress with high walls and equipped his followers with high-tech weapons, including a machine gun that carried 1 million rounds. In an interview, Koresh stated that he quit school in 9th grade because he had other things to learn. Apparently, he was learning about people. When asked about the people in his Waco compound, he said, "These people here, well, you know what they think of me? They think I'm the Son of God." When he was not drilling his beliefs into his followers through hours of Bible study or brainwashing them, as psychiatrists today say, he was blaring doomsday rock music about death and destruction. He sang about an army that would surround their compound and attempt to destroy the cult, almost like he knew what would happen on April 19th, 1993. What led to the Waco siege? What became a 7-week siege and a horrible assault on Mount Carmel was meant to be a raid by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. The ATF suspected the Davidians of illegally converting semi-automatic rifles into fully automatic weapons. It seems like the government was more interested in the weapons allegations than reports about Koresh sexually assaulting the underage daughters of his followers. There were many points in the ATF investigation that they saw the signs to abort, but it turned out that their goal was not only to enforce gun laws, but also to impress the congressional budget makers. They even named the operation Showtime, and they had underestimated the Davidians so much that one ATF agent booked tea time in the afternoon. A group of undercover agents moved to the house opposite the Waco compound, but it was obvious that they were feds. Even if they threw a house party to reduce suspicion, some Davidians visited the party, mingled, and reported back to Koresh. One agent, Robert Rodriguez, pretended to be a follower, but Koresh knew he was a fed. He allowed him to come to Bible study anyway, reminding his followers that even Jesus preached to a Roman centurion. On the morning of the attempted ATF raid, the undercover agent heard Koresh was tipped off about the raid. Despite reporting back to his superiors, they did not abort the mission. The raid proceeded, and the agents were met with heavy gunfire. After a few hours, the gunfire ceased, with 6 Davidians and 4 federal agents dead and many more injured. What occurred after was a 51-day siege between the Davidians and the FBI. Tensions within the FBI. The raid on Mount Carmel, that was meant to be a show of ATF competence, descended into a prolonged and dangerous conflict. The FBI was called in, but immediately backed into a corner, and the Davidians were stuck in their compound with plenty of food, bullets, and a diminishing water supply. Although it seemed like the FBI was in charge of the situation, the reality was far from true. When asked later, Bob Ricks, the FBI special agent in charge of the operation, said the hostages were not those Davidians in there. The hostage in the whole process was the FBI. We had to respond to the demands of David Koresh. We were like actors in his play. In the final analysis, everything rested under the control of David Koresh. Steve Schneider, Koresh's closest aide in negotiating with the FBI, accused them many times of trying to get rid of evidence. On March 6, 1993, he said, "If you people don't burn the building down, it would surprise me that they wouldn't want to get rid of the evidence. Since the building eventually burnt down, The FBI continues denying this was their intention. Even while there were tensions between the FBI and the Davidians, there were also conflicts between the FBI negotiators and the hostage rescue team. The HRT believed Koresh was a liar and would never come out of Mount Carmel or release any people, so they should use force. However, the negotiators believed they could eventually coax Koresh into a peaceful surrender. But while all this was happening right outside the Waco camp, the FBI had a listening ear inside too. Inside the Davidian camp, they had told the FBI that they would eventually surrender after Koresh was done writing his treatise on the Book of Revelations. They communicated with the outside world by writing on bedsheets and hanging them out of the windows, but the FBI had listening devices and phone lines connected to the camp. Immediately after the initial ATF raid, Koresh told the FBI negotiators during a telephone conversation that they would either smoke bomb them or burn their building down, another eerily accurate prediction he had made. In the thick of the siege, the residents of the Waco compound were not scared about the idea of meeting their end in fire. They believed that if God wanted to save them from fire, he would find a way. Schneider's wife even reminded the FBI of the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Bible, who were saved from the furnace. A listening device close to the front door also caught snatches of conversation from the residents the day before the assault. One said, "They can't destroy us unless it's God's will they do. Haven't you read Joel 2 and Isaiah 13, where it says, He will take us up like flames of fire?" However, the FBI believed that this meant the compound residents had plans for arson. But did the FBI even have plans to wait them out? Why didn't the FBI wait Waco out? By late March, FBI commanders planned a tear gas assault on the compound and sent it to Janet Reno by April 12th, who was the new Attorney General then. The plan was to ease the residents out of the compound by injecting tear gas into the building, one section after another. They had no plans to destroy the building because it could risk harming the children. However, Reno was unsure of the plan because she felt the CS gas, a type of tear gas, would cause harm to the children and pregnant women in the compound. This was especially true since gas masks don't fit children's faces. So, the report given to Reno told her that there would be no permanent injury to the children and that the gas would not cause a fire. Before we go on, it's important to note that over 100 countries have banned the use of CS in warfare, and the manufacturers also warned against using it at home. Attorney General Reno was still unsure about the tear gas plan, so she proposed another, which was to cut off the compound's water supply and drive them out. On April 15th, an airplane loaded with spy gizmos was sent over to Mount Carmel at night, and they saw that the water tank was full. Summers in Waco were dry, so the residents could not depend on rainwater, and if they punctured the tank with gunshots, they would lose water quickly. The Davidians were already rationing water, but this plan was not executed, and Reno later said that there was no feasible method for cutting off the water supply. She eventually approved the April 19th assault that lasted for over 48 hours. The Justice Department would later say that they did not intend to make April 19th D-Day for the Mount Carmel residents, but no one could predict the horrible future that awaited. The FBI assault that changed everything. By 6:02 a.m. on April 19th, the FBI started puncturing holes in the building and injecting CS gas, but only 2 minutes later, the people inside Mount Carmel fired at the armored vehicles. The backup plan was to insert tear gas into all compound windows immediately, leading to an escalation of the assault. But only about 7 people could leave the building, because by 11:40 a.m., about 20 minutes after the last CS gas rounds was fired into Mount Carmel, the building caught fire. In less than an hour, the fire had spread from end to end. It was insisted by Reno, the president, and even specialists who would later inspect the building, that the occupants of Mount Carmel set the fire themselves, whether for theological reasons or they decided to die for their cause. Koresh and his followers believed that they had orders to burn the compound to the ground. The Bureau's tanks started crashing into the walls of the building, while they declared that this was to move the gas into the inner recesses. This ended up cutting off the telephone lines and closing the escape routes. Once the fire had simmered down, the sight that awaited them inside Mount Carmel would haunt many. Aftermath of Waco. From the accounts of survivors, it was clear that many of the adults in Mount Carmel preferred death, and even death for their children, rather than surrender. About 24 people died from gunshot wounds, including Koresh and Schneider. One of the dead children was found with a stab wound. 6 women were found near the trap door, where they had tried to escape before the tanks blocked the escape routes. In the cafeteria, they found 36 women and children huddled together, some wrapped with wet towels and blankets to protect them from the tear gas. 6 died of blunt force trauma due to the falling concrete walls. Mostly unaccounted among the dead were two fetuses born because of the fetal ejection reflex suffered by their mothers, Aisha Gyarfas, who died of a gunshot wound, and Nicole Gent, who was crushed to death by concrete. With all of these losses and deaths, the question most people ask are, could the Waco event have been prevented? The initial raid on Waco has been reported as one of the longest shootouts with American law enforcement, and the end of the siege is one of the most devastating events in American history. While the Davidians can take most of the blame for what occurred, there is no doubt that the government could have done things differently to prevent the deaths of the innocent people trapped in the compound. What do you think about the Waco events? Should the government have followed a different approach? And was the bloodshed inevitable? Let us know in your comments below.